Hi, and welcome to episode 87 of Toke Signals TV, where we bring you the biggest in cannabis and hemp news stories every week. I'm Steve Elliott, the editor at TokeSignals.com, and I'll be guiding you through the news. Let's look at our Toke Signals Bud Pick of the Week. Some of you have been following the progress of this particular harvest. This plant is Big Permafrost, a sativa dominant. The genetics are from Secret Seeds in Seattle, and the results are quite pleasing. This is from a closet grow under LED lighting, supplemented with HPS, and heavy trichomes are quite abundant. Let's do the news now, shall we? In the United States this week, Congress passed 3 amendments to stop the Drug Enforcement Administration from undermining state marijuana laws. Legislators on Wednesday passed 3 amendments to prohibit the DEA and the U.S. Department of Justice from undermining state marijuana laws as part of the U.S. House of Representatives' consideration of the fiscal year 2016 Commerce, Justice, and Science Appropriations Bill. A 4th amendment failed. The House also passed an amendment Tuesday night ending the DEA's controversial bulk data collection program. It passed 3 amendments cutting $23 million from the DEA's budget and shifted it to fighting child abuse, processing rape test kits, reducing the deficit, and paying for body cameras on police officers to reduce law enforcement abuses. We made incredible progress today through passage of amendments that removed the threat of federal interference from state hemp and medical marijuana laws, said Representative Earl Blumenauer, Democrat of Oregon. Congress showed more support today than ever before, making this the latest victory in a quiet revolution underway across America to reform and modernize our marijuana laws. This follows the narrow defeat of my Veterans Equal Access Amendment to the House Milcon VA Appropriations Bill and passage in Senate Appropriations Committee of similar amendment, Representative Blumenauer said. Action today demonstrates the forward momentum on this issue in Congress. I was disappointed to see Congressman McClintock's broader amendment narrowly fail, Blumenauer said. Oregon, Washington, Colorado, and Alaska should be free to move forward with their voter-approved adult-use marijuana programs, also free of the threat of federal interference. I look forward to continuing to work towards this goal. The federal government should never come between patients and their medicine, said Congresswoman Barbara Lee, Democrat of California. Passage of this amendment brings us one step closer to providing relief for those suffering from multiple sclerosis, glaucoma, cancer, HIV, AIDS, and other medical conditions. There's unprecedented support on both sides of the aisle for ending the federal war on marijuana and letting states set their own drug policies based on science, compassion, health, and human rights, said Bill Piper, Director of National Affairs for the Drug Policy Alliance. The more the DEA blocks sensible reforms, the more they will see their agency's power and budget come under deeper scrutiny. The Rohrabacher-Farr Medical Cannabis Amendment offers crucial protection for medical cannabis patients and the people that provide them with access to much-needed medicine, said Steph Scherer, Executive Director of Americans for Safe Access. Having reaffirmed the federal government's commitment to not interfere with state medical cannabis programs, it's now time to move forward and create a framework for federal and state cooperation in medical cannabis by passing the CARES Act, Scherer said. With the recent addition of Texas, the vast majority of the country is now living in a state with at least some legal use of medical cannabis, said Mike Liszewski, Government Affairs Director for ASA. This vote shows the growing recognition that the only responsible course of action is for the federal government to leave state medical cannabis programs alone and let them provide their citizens with this much-needed medical option. Last year, Congress made history with the first ever federal protections for medical marijuana caregivers and patients. And NCIA is happy to see that progress continue, said Aaron Smith, Executive Director for the National Cannabis Industry Association. This is an issue with overwhelming bipartisan support throughout the nation, and it's good to see that the House recognizes that it should respect the will of the American people in this way. We're disappointed that some members of Congress don't think the principles of respect for state policies and voter mandates should be consistently applied, but we're grateful to Representative McClintock, Paulus, and their co-sponsors for standing up for fairness, Smith said. We're very proud of the work that NCIA and our allies have done to educate policymakers about the critical need for federal marijuana policy reform. And we'll build on this toward even greater success in the future. Even Congress is now acknowledging the failures of the drug war and of the DEA and its invasive methods, said Major Neil Franklin, Executive Director of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, LEAP. Conservatives believe states have the right to decide their own rules. Libertarians understand prohibition infringes upon civil liberties, and liberals know the effect prohibition has had on racial minorities, families, and communities. Currently, 23 states, the District of Columbia, and Guam have legalized marijuana for a variety of medicinal purposes, and an additional 16 states have passed laws to allow access to CBD oils, a non-psychotropic component of marijuana that is proven uniquely effective in managing epileptic seizures that affect children. And of course, 4 states now, Alaska, Colorado, Oregon, and Washington, have legalized marijuana like alcohol. In 2016, voters in Arizona, California, Maine, Massachusetts, and Nevada are expected to decide ballot initiatives on the question of legalizing marijuana for adult use. A slew of recent polls show that significant majorities of both Democrats and Republicans strongly believe that the decision of whether or how to regulate marijuana should be left up to the states. The Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment passed the U.S. House last year with strong bipartisan support, and it made it into the final CJS spending bill signed into law by the President. Because it was attached to an annual spending bill, it will expire later this year unless Congress renews it. A second marijuana amendment by Representative Scott Perry, a Republican from Pennsylvania, passed 197 to 30. It would protect state laws that allow the use of CBD oils, but leave most medical marijuana patients and their providers vulnerable to federal arrest and prosecution. A third amendment by Representative Suzanne Bonamici, a Democrat of Oregon, and Representative Thomas Massey, Republican of Kentucky, passed by 282 to 146. It would prohibit the DEA from undermining state laws allowing the industrial use of hemp. A similar amendment passed the House last year. Now, a fourth bipartisan amendment prohibiting the DEA and Justice Department from undermining state recreational marijuana laws failed, 206 to 222. Continued protection for medical marijuana patients is something most politicians now agree upon, and we can expect that states' recreational marijuana laws will soon have the same level of protection against federal interference, according to Lieutenant Commander Diane Goldstein of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. 3 amendments cutting the DEA's budget passed by voice vote. Representative Ted Lieu's amendment shifted $9 million from the DEA's failed cannabis reduction and eradication program to the VAWA Consolidated Youth-Oriented Program, Victims of Child Abuse Act, and Deficit Reduction. Representative Steve Cohen's amendment shifted $4 million from the DEA to a program to reduce the nation's backlog in processing of rape test kits. And Representative Joaquin Castro's amendment shifted $9 million from the DEA to body cameras for police officers to reduce police abuse. The House also adopted an amendment preventing the DEA and DOJ from using federal funds to engage in bulk collection of Americans' communication records. That was offered by Representatives Jared Paulus, Morgan Griffith, David Schweikert, and Gerald Nadler. The DEA built the modern surveillance state, according to Bill Piper. From spying on Americans to busting into people's homes, the DEA doesn't fit in well in a free society, and the time is now to reverse these harms. The amendments are part of a growing bipartisan effort to hold the DEA more accountable and reform U.S. drug policy. The DEA is a large, expensive, scandal-prone bureaucracy that has failed to reduce drug-related problems, according to Piper. There's a bipartisan consensus that drug use should be treated as a health issue rather than a criminal justice issue. With states legalizing marijuana and adopting other drug policy reforms, it is time to ask if the agency is even needed anymore. According to Science this week, we learned that ancient humans probably smoked marijuana for their health. Ancient hunter-gatherers who depended on the wild before agriculture was invented not only foraged for food, they foraged for marijuana, according to Science. The medical benefits of cannabis, while still officially denied by the U.S. government, which, by the way, holds a patent on the damn stuff, was well understood by our forebears, probably instinctively at least 12,000 years ago, reports Stephen Morgan at Digital Journal. A team of anthropologists from Washington State University, led by Dr. Ed Hagen, wanted to see how cultures worldwide used cannabis historically. They especially wanted to see if ancient marijuana users were subconsciously influenced more by health reasons than just wanting to get high. Humans throughout history have probably sought out cannabis in the same way we searched out foods that are beneficial to us, according to Dr. Hagen. In the same way we have a taste for salt, we might have a taste for psychoactive plant toxins because these things kill parasites. If you look at non-human animals, they do the same thing, and what a lot of biologists think is they're doing it to kill parasites, according to Dr. Hagen. A study of the Aka tribes of Central Africa, one of the pygmy tribes living in the Congo, seems to confirm this hypothesis. The researchers found that the habitual use of cannabis could be based on good medical reasons, even if the users didn't directly make that association themselves. Now, according to the study, those in the tribe who used the most marijuana were much less troubled by intestinal worms. That's one of the worst health problems suffered by people in that area. The researchers analyzed 400 adult Aka who lived near the Lobai River in the Central African Republic, and they found that 70% of the males and 6% of the females used marijuana. Next, they sampled stool from the participants to measure infections and found that 95% of them contained the infection. Interestingly, though, the people who used cannabis had lower rates of infection than those who didn't. Anthropologists study such societies as the Aka, who lived by foraging for food in tropical forests, to better understand how prehistoric humans lived in the Stone Age. They surveyed almost all of the nearly 400 adult Aka living in the Lobai River in the Central African Republic and found about 70% of the men and 6% of the women were cannabis users, as we said. The surveys were supported by tests of the men, which indicated that 68% of them had recently smoked marijuana. The history of medical cannabis is quite long, Medical Daily points out. Humans have been using marijuana to cure headaches and chronic pain as an anesthetic and to treat wounds throughout the majority of human existence. In ancient China and Taiwan, surgeons used cannabis as an anesthetic during surgery. It shouldn't be surprising then, the Daily points out, that new research suggests that hunter-gatherer tribes used cannabis as a way to unconsciously stave off intestinal worms. And that study was published in the American Journal of Human Biology. Globally this week, music fans reacted with dismay as Paul McCartney switches from pot to alcohol for the kids. Paul McCartney presumably won't be singing "Let Me Roll It" to his grandkids anytime soon, after saying in an interview that he's given up marijuana to set an example to the youngsters. The legendary singer, songwriter, bassist, and former Beatle told The Mirror that he gave up pot, quote, "a long time ago," reports New Musical Express. "I don't do it anymore," McCartney, 72, said 2 weeks shy of his 73rd birthday. "Why? The truth is, I don't really want to set a bad example to my kids and grandkids. It's now a parent thing." McCartney has been busted for weed numerous times over the years, first in Sweden in 1972, and also including a 9-day jail stay after getting caught with nearly half a pound of weed in Japan in 1980. And he got caught again in 1984 in Barbados. "Back then, I was just some guy around London having a ball, and the kids were little, so I'd just try and keep it out of their faces," McCartney said. "Instead of smoking a spliff, I'll now have a glass of red wine or a nice margarita. The last time I smoked was a long time ago." That's a puzzling statement, since it's widely known that marijuana is safer than alcohol. Paul was reportedly first turned on to cannabis by Bob Dylan back in 1964. He urged the UK government to legalize weed in 1997, saying people are smoking pot anyway, to make them criminals is wrong. McCartney said marijuana got him thinking for the first time, really thinking, and it even helped him with his songwriting process. In Maine this week, backers of marijuana legalization initiative to kick off a petition drive on Thursday. The campaign to regulate marijuana like alcohol will kick off its petition drive Thursday in support of a statewide initiative to end marijuana prohibition in Maine and replace it with a system in which marijuana is regulated and taxed, similarly to alcohol. Campaign staff and volunteers held a news conference in Portland prior to fanning out and collecting signatures from pedestrians in the area. "We're excited to get out there and start talking to voters about the initiative and the many ways in which regulating and taxing marijuana will benefit the state," according to campaign manager David Boyer. When Portland voted overwhelmingly in support of making marijuana legal for adults, local officials opted to use state law to continue punishing people, Boyer said. We couldn't think of a better place to launch the effort to end marijuana prohibition at the state level. Now, backers of this initiative must have at least 61,123 registered Maine voters' signatures by January in order to qualify the initiative for the November 2016 ballot. You can find a summary of the initiative and the full initiative text on the campaign's website at www.regulatemaine.org. In Arizona this week, encouraging news as a new poll shows a majority supports ending marijuana prohibition. An independent poll released on Wednesday shows that a majority of 53% of Arizonans support making possession of small amounts of marijuana legal for personal use, with just 39% opposed. It comes from the Behavior Research Center, the latest Rocky Mountain poll. Support outpaced opposition in all three of the geographical areas that were surveyed: 53-38 in Maricopa County, 47-43 in Pima County, and 58-38 in rural Arizona. The survey of 701 Arizonans was conducted from April 29th to May 15th with a margin of error of plus or minus 3.8%. Arizonans are fed up with the failed policy of marijuana prohibition, said J.P. Holyoke, chairman of the Campaign to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol, which is supporting a statewide ballot initiative to end marijuana prohibition in Arizona and replace it with a system in which marijuana is regulated and taxed similarly to alcohol. They do not think adults should be punished just for consuming a substance that is objectively less harmful than alcohol. It's time for a more sensible approach, and that's what our initiative proposes, Holyoke said. The campaign has collected more than 15,000 signatures since launching its petition drive 3 weeks ago. It must gather more than 150,000 valid signatures of registered Arizona voters to qualify for the November 2016 ballot. The poll reflects what we're finding out on the street while collecting signatures, Holyoke said. We're finding that most voters agree that it's time for a more sensible marijuana policy in Arizona. Even those folks who are still on the fence seem to agree that our current prohibition laws aren't working. For more information, you can visit regulatemarijuanainarizona.org. In Puerto Rico this week, cannabis treatment helped a 9-year-old boy speak his first words. Kalel Santiago of Puerto Rico is just 9 years old, but he hasn't had an easy 9 years. At just 10 months old, he was diagnosed with a rare childhood cancer, neuroblastoma, and he spent more than 2 years going through surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation treatments. Then he was diagnosed with severe nonverbal autism. While he was in the hospital, we noticed he didn't speak at all and had some behavior that wasn't right, like hand flapping and walking on his toes, said Abiel Gomez Santiago, Kalel's father, from their home in Aguada, Puerto Rico. But we waited until he was 3 and cancer-free to look at his behavior. Abiel and his wife Gladys did a crash course in autism. They tried various therapies and eventually happened upon a treatment that would change their lives: hemp oil, rich in cannabidiol, CBD, which has anecdotally been shown to dramatically ease symptoms of both epilepsy and autism. They began giving their son twice daily doses of CBD oral spray, and the results were startling. Kalel started talking in just 2 days after a lifetime of silence. He surprised us in school by saying the vowels A-E-I-O-U. It was the first time ever, Abiel said. You can't imagine the emotion we had hearing Kalel's voice for the first time. It was amazing. The teacher recorded him and sent it to my wife. And we said, well, the only different thing we have been doing is using the CBD, Abiel said. Soon thereafter, he said, Kalel started connecting his sentences. He said, Amo mi mama, I love my mom, Abiel says. I don't know how to thank the CBD oil makers. But the product they tried, Hemp Health from California, which sells for $40 an ounce, and that's almost a 3-month supply apparently, is one of many CBD oils now marketed as legally attainable alternatives to the much sought-after Charlotte's Web, the most popularized version of high CBD marijuana to make cannabidiol oil, which is low in THC but high in non-psychoactive CBD. The oil is made from a specially cultivated marijuana, the cannabis flowers, and since medical marijuana is not legal in all states, especially for minors, scores of families from all over the country have moved to Charlotte's Web's source, Colorado. In response, Hemp Health and other versions derived from industrial hemp plants, THC-free cannabis stalks and seeds, have popped up on the web claiming to be cheap and legal alternatives. Project CBD, a nonprofit that promotes and educates on the medical uses of cannabidiol, is wary of these hemp-derived oils. CBD oils can be effective, Project CBD Director Martin Lee said. We would suggest, however, that anyone who is seeking such products should try to access CBD oil derived from cannabis rather than from industrial hemp, which is not an optimal source for CBD. Still, the results with Khalil have been nothing less than startling. He's been connecting, like he's awakening to seeing the world, Abiel said, noting that they have kept up the treatments for just over a month now, and that Khalil is continuing to make improvements. He's looking you in your eyes. He's been trying to say different things and imitate what we are saying. He's saying uncle, aunt, the names of my 2 kids. It's something amazing that I cannot explain. Khalil's response has surprised others as well, including his teachers and even the CBD oil company. We were really amazed to hear Khalil's progress because what they are using is a lower concentrate product, said Miguel Feliciano, president of Hemp Health's Puerto Rico distributor, Antonio and Associates. Like his parents, I am also in shock, Khalil's surf therapist, Dr. Giovanni Martinez, a clinical psychologist who works with Khalil, said. I never got him to speak, and it was something that was haunting me. Language was something that was missing. Martinez, who started a surf therapy school after being inspired by how surfing helped his brother, who has Down syndrome, said he researched the various uses of CBD oil after Gladys asked him about it for Khalil. He told her it was worth a shot. Now he's cautiously optimistic about how other children may benefit. I'm not going to say let's give this to every kid because we have to monitor and study it, Martinez said, but I am very impressed with his language development. Imagine a mom who has been waiting almost 9 years to hear her child speak. To me, he said, the story of Khalil is groundbreaking. In the United States this week, the Travel Joint wants to fund marijuana refugees. The Travel Joint is a cannabis travel booking source and leisure site. And it's on a mission to assist those who can be helped by medical cannabis, but aren't receiving the medicine they need because of outdated laws in their home state. The Cannabis Refugee Program, the Travel Joint, is now accepting applications from families that need financial assistance to relocate. Uprooting a family and moving to a new state is never an easy task, which is why we want to help cannabis refugees as much as we can, said the Travel Joint CEO, Brannon Zimbelman. Families should never have to choose between the health of their children and a job in a state where access to medical cannabis is prohibited. We look forward to the day that programs like ours are no longer needed because cannabis will be legalized on a nationwide scale, Zimbelman said. Utilizing social media, the Travel Joint will announce one family a month that were chosen based on a list of criteria ranging from severity of illness to financial need. The Travel Joint hopes to have surplus of aid coming in from outside businesses so that it can support each family for a 3-month period and make the transition as smooth as possible. Our goals are to find them comparable, if not better, jobs, resources, and communities, Zimbelman said. Families that are interested in applying and corporations interested in partnering on the Cannabis Refugee Program can do so by emailing contact@thetraveljoint.com. And individuals interested in donating to help the families can do so at a GoFundMe URL listed in the story on Hemp News. Check out US, the Travel Joint wants to fund marijuana refugees. We have a must-read for you this week from activist Sherry Sicard, who does so much on the part of marijuana lifers and those who have received unfair, unjust sentences for cannabis. Fred Cundiff is serving a life sentence for marijuana, and like most people serving life sentences for nonviolent, victimless crimes, Cundiff is an example of a prisoner behind bars because of America's horrendous conspiracy laws. He's been in prison since 1991, and we need to get this man out. He's in poor health and in his 70s. Hope you'll check that article out on tokesignals.com, Cannabis POW of the Month, Fred Cundiff, serving life for marijuana. Until next week, I hope you stay lifted. See you then.